Hi, everybody. I'm Kristi Whitfield, the Director of the Department of Small and Local Business Development. And today I'm joined by Sari Kurland, and we are talking about bankruptcy and debt resolution. Welcome, Sari.
Thank you so much, Kristi. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm pleased to be here and share as quickly as possible, as much information as possible about how to help small business owners during this difficult time.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this was something I was really excited, a topic I was really excited to dive into. So debt is something that gives people a lot of angst and agita, and we know that nobody likes to talk about it. It is this sort of third rail, and I think you and I have spoken a little bit on the phone. Tell me, what are the top things when people come to you? I imagine, and one thing we talked about was, by the time they come to you, often it's a little bit too late, right? And so maybe we want to demystify some of the language around bankruptcy. So tell us, what is bankruptcy? What is bankruptcy?
If I had $1 for every time somebody came to me too late, I'd be very wealthy by now. Bankruptcy is an opportunity either to eliminate or reorganize debt. But our focus as a law firm is always to see if there's some way that we can help a client avoid bankruptcy and try to figure out how to organize their finances, especially during this difficult time, and to come up with a priority scheme to make sure, not a scheme meaning a strategy as to how to manage their money to put themselves in the best position possible, either to attempt to remain in business or a good strategy to wind up operations and then ultimately either file bankruptcy or dissolve. And strategy is so important, and strategy is sophisticated. And when we talk about a strategy, we look to see, first of all, if it's a business owner, my foremost concern is what debt did the business owner personally guarantee? What obligations does the business owner have that will remain with him or her if the business is no longer operational? So I like to talk to my clients immediately about what their personal exposure is to help them figure out how to protect themselves in the event that the business is unable to succeed. I hope that answers some of your questions. You tell me.
Well, I think so, and I think, this is all, finances, there's so much emotion tied up in finances. And I think that a lot of times, especially when you're starting in business and you're getting going in your business, a lot of it is intertwined, right? And so I think in very simple terms, sometimes that line between your money and your business's money is not as clear as it might be, as it maybe you might wish it was in the later years. And so maybe just talk very simply about sort of the division between that line, between your business, your money, and your business's money, and why that's important as we talk about, maybe unraveling some of those things.
So what we find, what I've seen when a business starts to decline is that there is more of a blur between business money and the personal money. When a business is healthy and successful, typically the business will pay a salary to the owner. And then the owner has his or her own personal money to spend. But when the business is in a decline, if the salary has stopped, if the business isn't paying a salary anymore to the owner, and the owner is using some of the business money to pay his or her personal expenses, we wind up in a situation where we're concerned that if the business goes into bankruptcy, a Chapter 7 trustee or any trustee that would be appointed to manage the case is going to look very carefully at those monies. And they're going to be concerned that the person has taken money out of the business instead of paying the business's creditors. So it's very important to, one, understand what the exposure a person has personally from guarantees that they made. It's not unusual. Every business owner that generally has a credit card with the business name is always personally guaranteed, from what I've seen most of the time, unless it's a very large company. The business owner is generally personally guaranteed on the credit card, even if they use it for only business expenses. Equipment leases typically are personally guaranteed. It's not unusual where a business owner will take out a home equity loan and use those monies to fund the business. So there's there's exposure there, and there's equity that has come out of the house. So I find that the first thing that I need to do when I'm talking to somebody is to unravel the financial situation, figure out what are truly just business expenses, what are personal expenses. If the business is dissolved, what is the homeowner or what is the business owner going to be left with in terms of debt? That helps me figure out how to advise the company and the owner how to proceed and resolve the debt.
Talk a little bit, a personal guarantee, just talk about what a personal guarantee means for a business owner.
So it's not unusual if a business owner is going to go to a bank to obtain a loan, enter into a lease to rent space, enter into a lease to rent equipment, enter into a lease to get a car. That even if those leases and those obligations are in the name of a business, they're personally guaranteed by the owner, which means that both the business as well as the person individually in their individual capacity are obligated on that debt. So if the business closed, even though the business doesn't have any assets anymore from which that creditor could collect, the creditor can still go after the business owner because of that personal guarantee, because they agreed that their guarantee would continue even if the business goes away.
Now, sometimes your bills are piling up and you have just only so much money and you're trying to decide who to pay. Maybe talk a little bit about, from your legal expertise, who should you pay first?
So it's very important, as I mentioned earlier, to have a strategy in terms of when times get tough and money is scarce, to have a strategy in terms of who to pay. And I always consider what debts must be paid and what debts don't necessarily have to be paid if the if the business owner goes into bankruptcy. So the debts that would not go away if the business owner has to file bankruptcy would be business debts that the business owner is obligated to, would be continued to be obligated for. And that would be sales tax, for example. Sales tax are trust fund taxes, and they must be paid. Withholding taxes to the government for salaries paid to employees, those must be paid. So to the extent possible, when there are obligations for trust fund taxes, I always recommend that my clients pay those type of taxes first, those type of obligations first. Unfortunately, the vendors and suppliers who they typically rely on to run their business are generally on the bottom of the totem pole with respect to who should be paid first when money is scarce. Obviously, you need to pay your vendors and suppliers to continue in business. However, if the business is dissolved, you want to make sure all your money that you have that is available to pay creditors would go to those type of debts that you would have a personal obligation for if the business is closed.
And when people come to you, what percentage of the cases actually end in actual bankruptcy? You know,
so that's a really good question, because when we have a small business where there is a mingling of funds between the business and the individual, it's less likely that we're going to file a bankruptcy case for the business. And it's more likely that we'll just dissolve the business and file a personal bankruptcy case for the business owner. And it's really, sometimes it's the only way to get the business owner a fresh start, because when times get tough, business owners will use their own credit to borrow money, to become obligated on debt, to just, it's that last hurrah. It's doing everything they possibly can to keep their store open or the restaurant open or their shop open or their company open in some way, shape, or form. And so they'll borrow money individually in their personal capacity to keep on funding the company. And when that runs out, they're left with that personal debt. So often, because of the intermingling of funds, I will typically dissolve the company and file a personal bankruptcy for my business owner. That's more common these days.
Well, and I think the other thing we had talked about is that a lot of times, it may be an option of debt resolution as opposed to a full bankruptcy. Because it seems like sometimes there's an opportunity to resolve debt instead of going all the way through to debt resolution. And can you talk a little bit about the line between filing for a full bankruptcy and going through the process of resolving or mitigating debt?
Well, to the extent possible, I would so much prefer to be able to work settlements out for my clients so that they can remain in business and put them in a position to negotiate a long-term pay schedule or just a payment schedule that they can live with and work with so that they can remain in business, pay their creditors, keep their suppliers in place, and continue operating. And when that is possible, when the income is good, when there's income still there, or when the income will, like in our situation right now with COVID-19, hopefully reemerge, there's income to fund those payments. Anytime a retail store, a business owner has to close shop, that's usually the end of their company. So to the extent possible, when we can negotiate settlements, and I typically negotiate settlements at about 40%, generally less than 50%. When I can do lump sum settlements, when I can do long-term settlements or payment arrangements, that brings a lot of relief to the business owner and helps them with a way to reemerge and to continue operating in an affordable manner. And if we can do that, it's always the best strategy.
So this was something that I learned from talking to you, was that lawyers do this. And now, what is the difference between you doing this? And I mean, I hear about a lot of debt settlement companies that seem a little bit more sharkish or a little bit more expensive or dangerous.
Their debt settlement companies generally operate in a manner that requires the debtor, the borrower, to make monthly payments. And the problem with those type of companies is that typically they use any payments that their clients pay to them to pay their own fees first, and they don't generally have the money that they need to negotiate settlements for their clients. They also don't have that one-on-one personal interaction with creditors that our law firm would have. We would typically, if we're negotiating a settlement, we would call and speak immediately to the creditor. And when a bankruptcy lawyer or a lawyer who has expertise in bankruptcy gets on the phone with a creditor and says, hey, we need to work something out, I think that my experience is, if I can toot my own horn, is that there's more impetus on the creditor to work with me because they know if they don't, they might get nothing. And we have been very successful in helping businesses. Now, this makes sense. Obviously, there has to be enough money owed for the business owner to, I mean, we're not talking about $1,000 or $5,000 debt. We're talking about something more significant, obviously, because it doesn't make sense to pay legal fees to negotiate a settlement for a small amount of money. But even when our clients are paying us a legal fee to negotiate a settlement, it's significantly less, that they're paying in total significantly less than they would have paid had the debt settlement company negotiated the debt, or had they tried to do that on their own. We've been very successful with that. And I really enjoy doing that, because if I can put my client in a position where they can, again, continue to operate and remain in business with a strategy that we've created by negotiating these settlements and payment arrangements, it's a win-win for everybody.
Time is money. And so let me ask, I had asked you this, if someone is going to talk to a lawyer about bankruptcy, what would be helpful to you as a lawyer to have prepared? Your ideal perfect client is coming to see you to talk about potential bankruptcy. What should they bring you for that first initial meeting?
My ideal perfect client would have 2 years of bank statements, a year of bank statements, 2 years of tax returns, and a complete list of their personal debts and their business debts. And if I can see that, I can size up the case very quickly and I can give good advice. And I'm happy to do that for anyone. that listens to this podcast and is concerned about their current financial situation, thinks that they might be running into a difficult period, thinks that they're concerned about having to close shop or close up, or just concerned that they can't manage their current debt load, we're happy to look at their situation. We're happy to review it. We're happy to give advice. We offer a free 15-minute telephone consultation. And if I have those documents, I can generally provide any business owner some at least good first quick initial thoughts and suggestions.
Well, so Sari, I really appreciate this time. And I wanted to say to the business owners or to anyone who is listening to this, we know that this is a scary topic, you know, and we wanted to kind of hit it head on and say, bankruptcy is a tool in a toolkit. And, you know, it can be a reorganization tool, and it can be and it can also be a tool for people that are going to shut down and take a different path. But we also want people to hear that we want to remove the shame that has been sort of associated with this tool, because it is a tool that is there to help, along with a lot of other tools, and that the legal advice that is, you know, helpful along the way can really save you a lot of pain by not taking this. And, you know, Sari and I had talked about the difference of not knowing and trying to do some things blind, you know. And I think that, you know, you had made a point that I wanted to sort of tee up for you about sort of access to legal advice.
So important. Just calling a lawyer, reaching out, having a quick consultation, even if it's going in and paying for an hour's time or doing it via Zoom, you would get so much advice in terms of how to proceed, coming up with a strategy, figuring out what is the best course. It's so worthwhile, because unfortunately I see so many clients that just make mistakes wanting and wishing and hoping they're doing the right thing, but not having that background, not having the legal background, the financial background to make the right decisions. And if they would invest in that strategy, in obtaining that advice, they would be so much better off long term. The first thing that my clients always say to me is, if they file bankruptcy, and when bankruptcy is necessary, they say they can't believe that they waited so long and it was the smartest thing they ever did, and they thank me because I push them to do it. I always say I'm 115 pounds of steel. I make people, but because nobody grows up to file bankruptcy. Nobody wants to file bankruptcy. It's not part of getting married, growing up, having children. It's not something you want to do in your life, but it is a fantastic tool, a legal procedure to utilize in a bad situation. It's the best result in a bad situation. And we as Americans are very lucky that is our legal, our laws and our legal system allows our citizens this fresh start that you can obtain during bankruptcy. It's not, I lecture around the world on insolvency, and it's not available in most countries. Most countries are amazed at how generous our legal system is and supportive of the concept of a fresh start. And we are really grateful for that.
Well, Sari, again, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And, you know, I just want to say to anyone that is listening, avail yourself to all of the different options that are out there, and get educated, and just know that DSLBD is here to help you through the various and sundry options. We're here to help. We're here to connect you with other experts that are also here to help. This is a tough crisis that we're in, and just know that whichever path you take, we hope that we are, you know, helpful to you, and we're dedicated to coming out on the other side of this stronger. So thanks for listening. I'm Kristi Whitfield, the Director of the Department of Small Local Business Development.